Alright guys, for our lesson for today is we are going to be drawing a bunch of simple objects through a constructive manner, and along the way I will teach you stuff about perspective. Basic things like the horizon line, the vanishing point, converging lines, parallel lines, all those concepts. I'll try to teach as we draw a simple object. Okay? So I'll be showing you more examples later with regards to these simple objects. But for now, um, before we head on to those discussions and the actual demo, let's do some warm-ups first. Yeah, warm-ups. So for the first thing that you need to do, well, for warm-ups is, well, we are going to be drawing a bunch of straight lines, freehand straight lines. So you're going to be using your pencils and paper, and you're going to be using your arms. So uh, thing thing here that you need to keep in mind is you have to draw away from your body. So for example, it's gonna be like this. And as you draw away from your body, you have to use your whole arm. So right until your shoulders. Well, it starts from your shoulders and then you move away from your body. So if you're doing it right, your lines will probably look like this. And if you're not really used to this, I know some of you guys are used to drawing like this, using short strokes. It's gonna be a bit of an adjustment, but I urge you guys to use your arms, since the paper that we'll be using eventually is gonna be 11 by 17. The A3 size. The reason why I chose that is because well, it's big, and that way you will be forced to use your arms when you're drawing. So I don't want to see, well, for next week when I check your work, I don't want to see lines that are drawn like this. Okay, so that's a bad example. Okay, that's not something I want you guys to do. So guys, I want you to draw like this. So imagine you're just doing big check marks. So yeah, although I'm drawing here using my tablet, well, I'm still using my whole arm. Okay, now the reason why, well, it's like this. It's because, well, the reason why my lines look like they're not really on the proper angle, well, it's because it's easier for me to draw away from my body using this angle. Now, if I want to draw straight lines using, well, the same method, I have to rotate my canvas on the same orientation on where my arm would go. So imagine, well, my canvas here, you imagine that this is going to be the paper. Okay, so just draw straight lines like so. So that's going to be your warm-up, and the paper that I'm giving you guys, or that I'm asking for you, is very cheap. It's a copy paper, and I think, and the online stores, I think in Lazada and Shopee, I think those, or the pack of paper costs around 500 pesos for, well, 500 sheets. So it's almost a peso, 1 peso per per paper. So it's gonna be cheap. So that's the reason why I asked you guys to have at least 100 of those, because we will be consuming a lot of paper. Okay. So afterwards, well, you fill out your paper. So imagine this is gonna be the 11 by 17 paper or the A3 paper. You're gonna fill out the rest of your um, paper with this one. So maybe do this maybe 2 or 3 times more. Okay. So you can practice, well, shorter strokes like this. And the thing here, the challenge here is you make them parallel as much as you can. Okay, it takes some practice, but it will help you loosen up. And eventually, when we draw cubes, maybe tables, maybe chairs, you will be more confident with your strokes. So once again, guys, don't do this kind of stroke. Okay, we want long, confident strokes. And as much as you can, you try to make them parallel. Okay, we're gonna move on now to a next set of warm-ups. Okay, we've been doing straight lines, right? Freehand straight lines. Now what we're gonna do next is we're gonna be drawing converging lines. Okay, so imagine you have a point here, right? And then you will try to draw lines that are converging from this point using the same technique. You're drawing away from your body. Now, let's say you're having a hard time drawing from your body. Well, you just rotate your canvas or your paper to help you get the right direction. Okay? Now, another thing that you could do is, well, you don't have to do the complete circle. You can just maybe choose a quarter of an area on where you could create converging lines, like so. Then maybe do it this way. Do it again, like so. Okay. Another part of this is, well, you could do you could target points here. So you have 1 point. So a while ago, the previous one, well, we were just drawing lines originating from a single point. Now let's try another set of warm-ups wherein we're gonna connect these 2 points together. Now in Photoshop, well, it's easy, right? You can use that, the line tool. But for us, we are gonna do it freehand. So we're gonna try our best to hit that mark. Now for me, it's a bit harder since although my screen is very large, it's 27 inches. I'm limited by the size of my tablet. So pardon me if my lines don't look good. The purpose here of this exercise is for us to be more accurate with our freehand lines. We need to be more precise. Although we can't expect our lines to be super duper accurate like as you would draw it with a ruler, right? But our lines should look, well, presentable even if it's in freehand. Points, like so. All right, so you're gonna do a bunch of these and fill out your paper and do it maybe 2 or 3 more times in different sheets of paper. So don't be afraid to waste your paper because these warm-ups are always helpful. So this is a basic skill because for drawing, anything that you draw, well, it starts from a simple line, right? It's from a simple point. And if you can't draw those lines properly, well, how are you supposed to draw more complex objects, right? So start with this, refining your skill in drawing freehand lines, and it will help you a lot in you guys drawing more complex stuff, more creative stuff, because we have to get these basic things out of the way. Well, you have to be very proficient with this one so you don't have to think about the technique. Okay? Okay, now that we're done with the warm-ups, well, let's have a short discussion uh, about perspective. Now I'll explain more of these concepts in person because I because it's really hard to explain all of these um, online. I find it easier if I present you these concepts personally. I feel like I could explain this stuff better, well, in a face-to-face setting. So I'm just gonna show you or explain to you some basic concepts. Now, for perspective, the first thing that you have to consider all the time, well, is the horizon line. Well, the horizon line is your eye level. Okay? When you're looking outside, when you're looking at anything, you will always have this horizon line. So for example, if you're looking at the sea, right, you're always going to see the edge of the sea. Now the horizon line is something that you can't really reach. Okay? It's just a simple visual representation of where your eye level is. So here's a here's an example of um, what I'm talking about. Okay, so this guy, well, this is you, right? And then this is the eye level right here. So that's the horizon line. Now this is a third person view of how perspective works. Now from this guy's POV, this is how it looks. Now this is the horizon line. So as you can see, the horizon line is right below the top edge of this cube right here. Okay, so let's say if he sits down, let's say he squats down like this, right? So the horizon line would be much lower. Okay, if he stands on a stool, okay, the horizon line would be somewhere around here. Okay, and as you move around, okay, as you move down or up, the perspective will also change. Now, for example, this one, right? It appears that he is looking from a higher angle compared to this one. Okay, so keep in mind the eye level of whatever it is that you're trying to draw. Okay, and another example would be this one right here. Okay, so this is the eye level of, of the viewer. So when you see it on your own POV, the eye level is here. Now, let's say he got taller, right? Or maybe again, he's viewing it from a higher vantage point. So most probably, he's gonna be seeing the top portion of the cube. So maybe from this view, it's gonna be something like this. So the horizon line will no longer be this way. It's gonna be somewhere higher. Okay? So going back here to my diagram, well, that's a horizon line. Another thing that you have to consider in in perspective is the vanishing points. Okay, so the first example that we have, or the first um, kind of perspective we have, is a 1 point perspective. So 1 point perspective, well, it looks like this. So you have one vanishing point, which is this one, and all the lines or objects would converge towards this vanishing point along the horizon line. So always remember, guys, the vanishing point should always be along the horizon line. Now, a good example of a 1 point perspective is this one. Okay, so once again, this is the horizon line, and these are the same cubes, but they are just positioned on different areas in space. Now, this is your eye level, and as you can see, when you are viewing an object, let's say a cube, when you are viewing an object above your eye level, you're gonna see the bottom plane of that said cube. if you're viewing this cube from above your eye level, you're gonna see the top plane of the cube because you are looking above it. Okay. On the other hand, on this set, you are looking from below the cube. Now, if the cube is right in the middle of your eye level, you won't be seeing the top portion or the bottom portion of the cube because, well, it's perfectly level on your eye level. So, well, you have three dimensions here. Now, of course, when you're seeing the top portion or the bottom portion of the cube, you won't be seeing the top portion of the cube right here because we only have three dimensions in space. That's the perception that we have as human beings. Another thing to keep in mind, guys, is when you are dealing with one point perspective, the lines or the planes that are facing you directly, which is this one, okay? This shaded area here, this front plane of the cube is gonna be perfectly straight. So these planes are parallel in space, so they will never meet in a one point perspective. So keep that in mind, okay? So when you're drawing cubes in one point perspective, you can't make them go this way and then have your lines go this way. That's going to be wrong. It's not going to be one point perspective anymore. So again, keep in mind, planes that are facing you perfectly straight, if these planes are perfectly straight and are directly facing you, they won't be going to a vanishing point. So all the vanishing points will happen on these areas of the cube. These areas are the planes of the cube that are receding in space. Okay, now, so let's say we want to draw objects in a one point perspective. Well, first you have to establish the horizon line and then maybe place a plane here. Establish your vanishing point. So this is going to be VP. Alright. And then we're going to create a plane. And then from this plane, we can create a cube. From this point, we're going to intersect everything here. Oh, wait, got it wrong. I have to go back. So let's establish the back plane of the cube. Okay, and then from here, we'll try to match the corners here. Then have it go back to the horizon line. And then move up here like that. And from here, we can just erase these lines that we don't need. And then let's make these outside lines a bit heavier. So maybe another box here, maybe from above. And then maybe another cube here on the right. So here, well, as you can see, one point perspective is very easy. It's very straightforward. So you only have to deal with one vanishing point. Just make sure that these lines go to the same vanishing point. You don't want, let's say your lines, okay, for example, you have this cube right here, right? You don't want your lines to go to a different vanishing point, okay? Because that will destroy the illusion of space that you're trying to provide. Because remember, guys, this canvas here, or this paper, or the paper that you have, is merely 2D, and the way we provide the illusion of space is by following the rules of perspective. And the rules of perspective is something that's very objective. Kumbaga, you can you can really identify if it's wrong. Okay, and even a non-artist can see if your drawing has a wonky perspective. Okay, so if you want to be good, even if you're just drawing figures, anything that you draw is bound by the rules of perspective. So here's, well, 1 point perspective. Now another example of perspective is the 2 point perspective. Now for 2 point perspective, well, as the word says, well, it's 2 points. So you have VP1 here, then you have VP2. So that's the basic thing about 2 point perspective. You have two vanishing points. So for example, well, you have a line here and a line here. We can try to create a plane. Let's establish a good size for the plane. So this point right here, then we can go back here. And then for the other, maybe let's just estimate we can go right around here. And again, connect those planes right here. As you can see, every time I'm trying to draw a cube, I'm trying to work from the ground up. I want to first establish the position of the cube from the ground. And from here, I will try to establish a height for the cube, like so. And then another one right here. And then move it here. And we have an object in 2 point perspective. Now, what something you don't want to do for this one is, once again, create inconsistent vanishing points. Now, again, for example, you have this plane right here. You have this corner here, and you place your line on this vanishing point. On the third vanishing point, that's not supposed to happen. So even though right now it looks right, when you add more things, when you make this cube more complex, this will look wrong. Because for this plane right here, for this area here, this plane here should only go to one vanishing point. You can't have this plane go to a different, or you can't have this line here go to a different vanishing point. Now for one object that's oriented, now this goes for an object that's perfectly straight. So you have a perfectly straight tile right here. So all sides should go to one vanishing point. The same thing goes here. You can't have this bottom line here or this bottom area of the plane go to this vanishing point. That's wrong already. Okay, so the key word here, or the key thing that you have to keep in mind, is consistency. Now for any plane that you want to go to the right, should go to this vanishing point right here. Provided, well, that they're on the same orientation. Now what do I mean by that? So let's say you're gonna add a new plane, right? And you want this new cube to be facing the same direction. Okay? So you still have to follow the same vanishing point. If you try, maybe you're gonna add a new cube that's facing the different direction, well, you have to create a new set of vanishing points. So this consistency is just for cubes or objects that are oriented on the same direction. So for example, well, you're looking at streetlights, right? For you're looking at buildings, right? So they're oriented on the same direction. They're facing the same direction. So those buildings will probably have the same vanishing points. Okay. Another thing that some students get wrong is when they are creating 2-point perspective cubes is they have one plane. Well, it's consistent, right? They're going on the same vanishing point. However, it's not going on the same horizon line. So this will create a weird box that feels like it's not set on the ground. Okay, so it has to be consistent by having your vanishing point on the same horizon line. You don't want this to be floating. Okay, so if you want to draw a cube or any object that is standing on the ground, you have to have them set. You have to have the vanishing points on the same horizon line. And now, of course, this could happen. This this vanishing point above the horizon line could happen if this plane here is inclined, meaning if there's an upward slope that's happening there. But we are just talking about a straight cube or a perfectly flat cube. There's no gradation, there's no incline or decline happening on the plane. It's perfectly flat, parallel to the ground. Now, having these concepts in mind, we'll move on to a new set of exercises. So now, as I said a while ago, there's gonna be two vanishing points, right? For a 2-point perspective, because for the most part, the plate that I will be giving you later will be objects objects that are based in a 2-point perspective. So you have to practice drawing lines in 2-point perspective. So you have here, first you establish a horizon line right here, and from there you try to create lines that are converging from this vanishing point. Now once again guys, these lines have to be freehand. Now it's okay if you don't get it immediately. That's a point of practice, right? Now for example here, you're having a hard time getting the right angle for your lines. You just rotate your paper to help you draw the lines better. Now let's move on to the other side. Now what I would do is I would just rotate this like this, and then from here I'll try to draw lines coming from this vanishing point. This like that. So I again guys, I don't want to see lines that are looking like this. It has to be one clean stroke. If it's not straight, that's okay. You can do it again. You can try again. So once again guys, maybe do this in maybe 3 to 4 or 2 to 3 sheets of paper, just so you can get the hang of this. Okay, so once again, create a point, and then from this point, radiate to the outside using your whole arm. So right now, my wrists, no, but my wrist is not really moving too much. Majority of the movement is happening on my shoulders and forearm. Now, when we go face to face, you will see uh, this process better, as I'm gonna be doing this exercises on paper again next week. Okay. Now after this, we're gonna do another exercise that would be that would have the same idea here. All right. Now the thing here is when you're actually drawing objects in perspective. Let's say, for example, um, you're gonna draw this chair right here, right? Now, when you're drawing this, let's say my whole canvas here, imagine that this is gonna be the whole paper that you have. This is gonna be the whole A3 sheet, right? And then this is the size that you will be drawing the chair. Now, if we place, well, let's say the lines here, you would see, well, that the converging lines or the vanishing points are far away from your canvas or from your paper. Now, if you zoom out, you would see that it's way beyond your paper. It's like you're extending your paper to around maybe two more times. And of course, when you're doing quick sketches, quick concepts, or you're just drawing a design of a chair, well, you can't always show the vanishing points every single time that you draw this chair. So you should have a good eye in drawing these lines. So when you draw this eventually in freehand, every time that you create a line, let's say create lines, right? So you have to always imagine that these lines go to a vanishing point off screen. And that's the concept of converging lines. That for everything that you draw in perspective, they would converge to a vanishing point. Now let's go back here. Let's go back to this exercise here that I did, right? Now, this is the horizon line. Now, typically, guys, when you create stuff in 2 point perspective, the actual paper is only this big. When you're drawing stuff in 2 point perspective, the vanishing points can't be inside the paper. Otherwise, they're gonna look too distorted. That's because you have here, this paper here represents the cone of vision that you have. Now, what do I mean by the cone of vision? Well, this is the cone of vision right here. Mm, let's see, right here. Now, as you can see here, this is the eyesight that you have, right? So this is your viewpoint. Now, you can imagine your vision as a series of points in space that creates a circular pattern or a cone. So that's the scope of your vision. So this is what I mean by the cone of vision. Now, the vanishing points of a 2 point perspective can't go here. It's too distorted. As you can see here, you have here a cube. Let's say the vanishing point of this cube is somewhere here off screen. And then the other one is somewhere closer. Okay? Sometimes you can have one vanishing point close to the cone of vision. Closer. But as you can see here, guys, it's not really inside. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, I'll explain all of these more in depth when we move forward to the following weeks. But for now, there's something to keep in mind when you are drawing 2D perspective or 2 point perspective. You have to place your vanishing points off screen or away or outside your paper. So going back to this warm up right here. Now this warm up here is only for, well, for warm up's sake. Now when you are actually drawing stuff inside or when you're actually drawing objects in your paper, the actual paper is gonna be this big. So the vanishing points are actually outside. Now, you have to practice. And let's say this is your actual paper, right? You have to practice drawing lines that are converging towards a vanishing point that you can see off screen. So how do you do that? Well, it takes practice. So for example, here, this is your actual paper, and then you imagine, okay, you have your horizon line. So I can draw, I want to draw lines that are going to an off-screen vanishing point. So I want the lines to look like this. So it feels like they're going to a vanishing point. They're converging. So for example, you have a line here. Of course, the other line can't go this way. It has to go this way. The other one can't go this way. It can't go this way. That's too much. It has to go this way. Well, around this area. And as you move closer to the horizon line, it's gonna get straighter and straighter because all lines that are along your eye level will be straight. And as you move up, well, it's gonna go in this direction. So these are converging lines in perspective. And then you have to imagine that these lines will eventually go to a vanishing point. Now, however, look, the lines that I did here are not really super consistent when you actually plot the vanishing point. It's not really super duper accurate. But if we look at the lines in isolation, well, it looks okay. It's passable. You know, you won't really notice it until you actually measure the line. So that's a thing that we want to achieve when we are drawing these converging lines. It has to look right, even though it's not perfectly right. It just has to be enough to sell to your audience because after all, we're just gonna be doing concepts, right? We're just gonna be doing isolated studies of simple objects. So I won't be going there and um, pulling out a ruler to measure every single thing if you miss it by 1 millimeter. Okay, as long as it looks right. If it looks right, well, that's okay. That's good enough. So again, let's do it here. A bunch of converging lines going off screen. So once again, please remember that these lines are supposed to go off screen. Okay, so another one like so. Of course, you can double check if you want. You can double check your lines if you are doing it right or if you're getting close enough. So these sets that I did, well, these look good. You know, they feel like they're going to a consistent vanishing point, except for this line right here. This line could be more like this. So that's okay. If I were to assume, I think these lines are about 75% or 70% right, and that's enough. Because once again, visually, without actually plotting them down to its vanishing point, it looks right. So another set right here, like that. Because eventually, guys, what would happen here is you will be drawing, let's say, planes that are converging in space. Now, if you don't have a good idea or estimate of where these lines would go, well, you would have a hard time drawing this chair in a freehand manner. So that's why these warm-ups are so important. So once again, you have a plane here, and then we're gonna create converging lines. You can make it like they're parallel, but not super parallel. Maybe this one can be slightly going downwards. Of course, you can't do it this way. You can't do it this way. Obviously, that's wrong because they're supposed to be going to the left. So they should be at least parallel or some a degree lower. So that's good, right? And then let's create another plane right here. And then let's have it go down here. And then go here. Now this is where the challenge starts because you have a bunch of lines that forms a cube. Now this line here, for example, has to be consistent with the other pair, with the other side here. You can't have this line here go upwards there because that will destroy the illusion of this cube that it's in 3D because you have a wonky line that's going on a different vanishing point. Another example where you can make it look off is having this line go here. Because obviously, if you were to look at this from afar, you would see that the lines are going this way. So the vanishing point is actually high up here. But here on the right side, it's not consistent with the left side because you establish a lower vanishing point here. So the cube looks wrong already. It's doesn't look like a three-dimensional cube. It looks weird. So once again, guys, make them look like they are the vanishing points or these lines are going on the same vanishing point on the same horizon line. Now, how would you know? Well, eventually you have to double check. You can extend those lines and check if they are actually close enough. Okay, so that's the thing. And then eventually you can you can have a good idea, you can have a good eye and tell if hey, this cube here doesn't look right even without looking at the vanishing point. Because that's important. If you're doing a bunch of objects, let's say you're drawing a complicated building or a complicated structure, you can't always check the whole you can't check every single line if it goes to the proper vanishing point. And sometimes you can have a grid, right? But sometimes the grid can have gaps. So let's say the grid goes like this, right? So what if you're trying to draw a line that's here in between the two established lines of the grid? So you're left with a choice to create a line that's close to those established lines. So you have to have a good eye in estimating lines that go to a proper vanishing point. Okay? So that's another set of warm-ups that you have to do. Practicing converging lines, and then after that, creating freehand cubes in perspective without showing where it ends. But they have to look right.